Good afternoon, everybody. There I am. And a very warm welcome to the Centre for the Less Good Idea, to our Collation 2 program, and the How Showing the Making part of this Collation program. For those of you who haven't attended our How Showing the Making is an opportunity for us to open the windows into process, to allow artists to really speak to their strategies of making, to their processes. And this afternoon, we turn the gaze inwards towards ourselves because our incredible impresario, Muyanga, has curated and imagined this extraordinary program, Sounding Pictures. And it's an opportunity for us collectively, both for Neo and for the artists working on the project, to take a step back and really reflect on what it is that we're doing and how we're doing it. So what you're about to witness here is us in a state of trying to capture that and reflect on what's been happening, particularly over the last week, where we've been building a language, building a grammar towards this project. The particular focus of this How Showing the Making, although it is a film project, it is about how sound is utilized, deployed to determine meaning, how it shifts meaning when we shift the score. So we have commissioned 11 filmmakers to make films, and then we've brought together this extraordinary ensemble, some of whom are here. This isn't the full ensemble, but this is a good, strong representation of the ensemble. So for today, we're focusing on this act of sound making and trying to really take a deep dive into the processes for each member of the ensemble from their particular roles and perspectives. So I'm now going to hand over to Muyanga, who will give you a much broader and deeper sense of the project. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again at 7.
Thank you, Athena. Good afternoon, everybody. As Athena mentioned, this is about showing the making. So the best thought we had today was to begin by showing you what we mean. So I'm going to elect Ensemble A of this session, and that's going to be Aragorn, Billy, and Stompie. And they're going to be playing through a film that was made by Penny Siopis. It's called Obscure White Messenger. We won't play through the entire film. It's going to be an extract of the first 5 minutes. We'd like you to watch it and hear the response by this Ensemble A. Thank you, Barry.
Wa hopola hore ho irahetseng. Wa hopola hore ho irahetseng. Ke motlhabile ka thipa, and thipa ene na le anti-rust. So namile hedi doctor di ready mo checka. Mawaza jo. Asata. Immediate. Uthabi, we could have, I mean, we could have, Uthabi, yeah, I mean, Tavetsu Wanawena. Eva Twagi Pelan one of us so gola. So Motosona Luena and the Classian. Kagai. Lerenko Mazarakis Utsagukai Alex o tswa ko ka Alex Egepeta o tswa ko Middleburg o mo tlhobomang well o tswa kae well o mo tlhobomang well ba re ke lekgowa why ka re ke na le bo yellow bone nyana why well someone had to do it okay yeah o le colored yeah o le dushu yeah o mo tlhobamang well o ikutlwa bjang I mean yeah so bana ba bang ko tlaseng ba re nna ke le half care ebe mistress are ba o tshella mona papa hao ona le bothekinyana papa hao well le khariki mama hao well mama how yeah o mo tlhobamang well o mo tlhobamang o rumile ke mang ke modimo well yeah so o bolela le modimo yeah
Penny Siopis, as some of you probably will know, is one of the most iconic visual artists in South Africa. She's also a filmmaker, and we've been very privileged to have Penny spend a lot of her time with us here this week and over the past month. And one of the materials that she's very keen on working with, particularly with film, is what's called found footage. So it's archival footage that either comes from her own archive or archives that she finds in different international markets. This is how she's formulated this film, but in essence, this film examines the story of Demetrius Tsafendas, who was the individual who was arrested for stabbing and eventually killing Hendrik Verwoerd. So it's got a lot of drama, the story, and what you heard here, hopefully, was one particular version, one particular interpretation of this. Now we'd like to trouble that a bit to move further. Now I'm going to elect an ensemble 2 to give you an alternative score to the same 5-minute extract. And the question is, what changes in the practice? Because we are interested in what the sound dramaturgy suggests in what you perceive in the storyline. The second ensemble will be DAPHNE, Pertunia, Micca, Arnaud. And we also will elect a section leader, was kind of a conductor, and I'd like you, Micca, to take on that role. like to give you a little bit of a backstory, a background about the inspiration of the project, but I will start first by asking each of the ensemble members to just do a quick introduction of yourself and your instrument or instruments for everyone, please. We'll start with Daphne.
Hello, I am Daphne. I play the viola, and I am also the composer for Ingumbo by Milisutando Bongela Davis. That's me.
Hey, I'm Aragorn, and I am playing the modular synthesizer.
Hi, I'm Stompie Selibe. I'm on gong and some wind instrument, the side flute, and some oud drum.
Hello everyone, I am Pertunia and I am vocalist.
Hello, Billy Langa, and I am the orator. I use voice and body.
Hi, I'm Arnaud from Vliet, guitarist.
Hi, riperile, vito ra mina mina Micca ni percussion ni bass group.
So you'll meet the rest of our ensemble members later when you get the full effect. We've called this project Sounding Pictures because really it's thinking through a 100-year history of film. And a century ago when film was first introduced, it came as a new technology that could only use one visual track. And you had silent films, and we know some of the iconic films, people like Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin were the masters of this practice. And in fact, Charlie Chaplin was one of the people who resisted what were called soundies at the time. Because the belief then was silent pictures are a way of giving you access to the imagination of the filmmaker, but to take away the sound and to give you only speech bubbles and title cards meant that the audience members could participate in completing the rest of the story. Because there are lots of gaps in the action. So the audience members were actively engaged and listening and participating. It was a call and response. And then Hollywood took on its grand form. The studios acquired the technology to bring sound to bear. And suddenly we had the first genre that was very popular with moviegoers, and it was horror film. And we started to hear very scary violin string sounds, and that evolved into synthesizer sounds. And eventually people started to understand the world of film as very much intertwined with the world of sound. So the sound studios, particularly in Hollywood, started to really take on ownership of what it was to make this kind of genre come alive. So what we're doing in this project is we're returning to these references, and we're trying to think back to what it might have meant, to put together the visual with the oral. But we live in such a visual-centric culture now. Most of what we learn, we take in through a screen, through information that is in color, and that is infused with sound. This is an opportunity for us to separate, to deconstruct this mechanism, and for us to ask ourselves anew, what is the role that sound plays in giving a meaning to the moving picture? And more than that, what does sound change in adding itself and its way of knowing to a picture? So I want to focus not so much on my ideas, because I have a few which I'll expand on, but I wanted to hear more about our collaborators here. We decided on a multi-pronged approach. One was to invite a number of personalities to be composers. And that meant they were privy to some of the information that was being used by the filmmaker to address a particular theme. They were in contact, they maybe have seen rushes, and they composed to that, and then they would bring some of those ideas, almost in coded form, to the rest of the ensemble. So the composers in this case were Daphne, Arnaud, and Aragorn. So I'll start here with Daphne. Can you talk to us a little bit about your approach to composing to Melissa Tando's film?
So, it's on. Okay. My role in this that I took for myself, there wasn't any instruction from the center or from the filmmaker. What was made apparent to me from our first meeting was that there were many themes that are quite important to be shown and directed to the audience. But also my role is to go deeper than just showing themes of grief, showing themes of identity in a post-apartheid South Africa. One of the examples that I want to use was in our meetings, Melissa Tando made reference to something called nature versus the machine. And in my approach to the score, I thought that, well, okay, I actually want to take that quite literal and use live instruments, but also introduce electronic sounds. And for me, that was important to convey the thoughts of the filmmaker, but also sounds that I'm interested in. So to also blend those two perspectives. And within the film, there are images such as water flowing, her aunt is praying in nature. And those are things that I took as inspiration for those feelings. What does it feel like when you are deep in prayer, when you are in a space of solitude because you are grieving a friendship of 10 years with your best friend that you thought would be there forever and is not there anymore? That was my inspiration that I took, that I felt that I needed to convey emotions rather than follow a certain form. As a classical musician, it's very easy to go and be like, okay, this is what I am thinking sadness sounds like, this is what I'm thinking grief and shame sounds like. But instead, I wanted to sort of go into the body. And you know, when you've been crying so much, your throat hurts, what does that feel like? There's a grain that you feel. And that is what I took out of it, that is my role, to then go and sound the complexities of feelings. So for example, in the film, I use paper to convey the sound of vinyl when it is crackling. So Micca, you can just show us what that sounds like. And in this as well, using the paper to give us that sound, but also in a less obvious way. So Micca would also place the paper on top of the drums when we want a muted drum. Yeah. And then further, so adding more textures, and in this case, the textures being the instruments, to convey also a conversation that is happening both inside the room sonically, but also a conversation that's happening in the film. And another thing that I took away from Melissa Tando was that she herself she's centered herself as a black woman in film. And in particular, this being silent film, she's decided to rebel, which I love, it's my personal forte. And with that, I try to convey this conversation between oneself, again, going back to those intricacies of feelings, and then also conversation in the room. So in the piece, we have drums from Micca, and then we also have the udu with Stompie, and we hear the conversation that is happening between the subjects, but also within or coming from the filmmaker. Yeah, so with these sounds, it can go from a conversation and it can go from two different drums, but then to also convey the natural sounds and to return to the self, to return to feeling in the body, because it's so easy to intellectualize these concepts as, you know, post-apartheid, post-racial, post-everything, that it just becomes a sonic thesis. But to bring it back to the body and the self, I would use natural instruments, so bamboo, saxophone, and many flutes that Stompie has, with another sort of flute thing, but then also Micca using a pipe as a wind instrument as well. So rebellion again. Thank you. Yeah, so with this, basically focusing on feelings and also what I'm personally feeling as the composer and then the conductor in this context. So I'm excited to see what we're gonna do tonight. It's gonna be different, and it has to be different because we're feeling different things. So I'll hand over to Arnaud to hear his approach.
Thank you, Daphne. Naomi van Niekerk, the filmmaker of An Argument Against an Ordinary Life, we've been collaborating for more than a decade, and we started off in live performance, combining music and animation. So this process is kind of familiar, but yet very different. I was lucky enough to see some of the images as she was making it, and I soon realized that the images had, or many of the images that I saw, had a definite rhythm to it. So I knew that a percussion instrument was going to be really important. And so the score has two driving instruments, the one being the bass drum, for the more intense parts of the score, and the other, the guitar, for the, let's call them the more lyrical parts of the film. It was an interesting challenge to bring the score to the musicians here, because I got to see the final film a week ago, and then proceeded following my normal procedures and creating a score, but knowing that I would be playing with an ensemble and not actually knowing exactly what the ensemble will be. Neo was quite secretive. He wasn't letting us know exactly what we were going to encounter. But at least I knew that there would be percussion involved. So presenting the score to the musicians, the idea was not to say, okay, I want you to play this exactly, although I had definite ideas for different parts of the film. I wanted to make sure that the different sections were very, very different. The tone of each section is very different, and I wanted to delineate them quite clearly. So we basically just had time to talk through the film. I could tell the musicians about some key images that I wanted them to take note of, where I wanted certain things to happen. But it was a case of me saying to Micca, you know, I want you to play a drum beat that sounds something like this. Just mouth something to him, and Micca came up with this. much better than my poor attempt at beatboxing. Yeah, so it was just a general feel of a general tempo, and Micca just brings his magic to it. As far as the guitar is concerned, I use a very specific tone for this film, which is a very dreamy tone. I can maybe just play you a little example here. So I'm doing volumes. Oops. Hello? Oh, there we go. So I'm doing volume swells, and I'm doing very textural things on the guitar. I'm trying to stay away from the normal kind of guitar sound, although there are moments where I utilize that as well. As far as the other musicians were concerned, we just had a brief talk through the film. And I don't think I was too specific about what you needed to do. And that's the magic of a process like this, where you're relying on the magic of the moment, the skill of the performer. And it's a really fantastic space to be in, because usually creating a score is a very solitary process, especially the initial parts of it. It's you in your studio behind your computer with your own instrument, and if budget allows, you get to pull in maybe one or two musicians at some point. But this is such a refreshing way to approach a score, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
And can we hear from Aragorn about your perspective around composing to Penny's film?
So, hang on, let's make sure that doesn't happen. So, I'm composing to Penny's other film, which is called Events on a Timeline. And that's probably the most neutral title you can give a film. Events on a Timeline is kind of a technical description of what a film is. But it kind of connoted for me the sense that the film wasn't supposed to impose any strong interpretive structure or signify anything. Or at least I didn't feel that my role as the composer was to sort of assert a signification or a representation onto the film. And that's very true when you watch it. It operates on kind of an affective, visceral level more than a sort of representational level. And I kind of wanted to be true to that. And I try to think about how best to go about that using my instrument, which is an electronic instrument and a very sort of cerebral instrument, usually something that you would spend a lot of time deciding how to compose with. And what I came up with was using my body as part of the instrument, so that I wasn't intellectually interpreting what was going on in the film, but rather allowing myself to respond on a sort of proprioceptive, interoceptive level. And what that really means is, so I have a little heart sensor, and that's measuring my heartbeat. And the heartbeat is determining the tempo of the piece. And when I watch the film, I'm watching the film in a particular context, right? It's not just about my body, but it's about the environment that my body is situated within. It has a certain temperature and humidity. There's an atmospheric pressure. So I have a little module inside the synthesizer that's detecting all of those parameters in my environment. And it's interfacing those with my heart rate in order to determine some of the melodic structure of the piece, and in order to modulate some of the other parameters, some of the other sort of timbral and sonic parameters. So I wanted my only role to be one of loosely interacting with what's already being expressed by my body in a feedback loop with the film and with the environment I'm situated in. The other interesting thing about Penny's film is that, unlike most of the other films, none of the other musicians have seen the film yet. I'm the only person who's seen that film. So they're going in totally cold. And for me, that's very interesting. That's Stompie and Pertunia and us Tebzo, who will be here later. And because they're going in totally cold, they're also not going to have had time to interpret the film. So they're also going to have a visceral affective response to it, hopefully. And in fact, what's quite fascinating about the film is that it's only right at the end, in the final few seconds, the very final scene, that something close to an interpretation imposes itself. And I'm hoping that'll be quite surprising to all of us. Yeah, that's me.
I think what I find more fascinating in terms of the beginning of the making of the process, that the sort of the internal world that we sort of find ourselves beginning to imagine, and then how emotion takes place. And I think this is one of the things that when you start playing, it wasn't really necessarily about the counting. It was about separating yourself to becoming in a very sort of trance of emotions, and how do you calculate that? And I think my question for you is that, how would you figure out to interpret those emotions, put it in a place where you feel safe and the rest of the team feeling secure as well?
Right, so for me, the fact that I'm in a collective context here and that we're sort of improvising and exploring together means that we're all part of that shared environment, right? So there's a kind of feedback loop between me and what the other artists are doing, that I'm trying to respond to in as intuitive a way as possible. But even simple things, so if the piece sort of starts picking up and getting exciting, my heart rate might increase, and that will build the tempo of what I'm doing, or the sort of density of what I'm doing, and then in turn, other people will respond to that. And so it's about those interesting little feedback loops that happen between all of us. That's what I find really interesting about it.
Do you ever know what sound is going to come out, or do you like just take what comes and you go with it? Like, do you ever know what sound is going to come out?
I think I try to create something that operates on a certain threshold. I don't want it to be totally random, because that's kind of just not interesting. And, you know, I'm still a participant within this little ecosystem, so I don't want to take away all my own agency. But I want it to be on that threshold where it's a kind of space of possibilities, and I can explore that space, but I'm not imposing any sort of unilateral control over it. It's a sort of co-participation between everything in the space.
So cool.
So there was one strand of the invitation, was to ask these three individuals to be composers, so in a sense to lead the procedural thinking. But the other part of the process was to invite other members of the ensemble to really bring spontaneity, to bring an intuitive response, to try and come into dialogue with what the images were suggesting, but also to try and find a way, spontaneously, to find a common ground with the rest of the ensemble. Pertunia, you have come on board as a vocalist, but you have a very particular understanding of vocality. Can you talk a little bit about your experience during this process?
So I am a vocalist. I'm a singer outside of here. But coming in here, and when you hear, oh, vocalist, you're thinking melody and song, and that's not wrong. I do that too. But I'm really interested in my life, in my practice. I'm interested in the power and the range of the voice, and what the voice can do. Like, if we're saying that, you know, if like certain vibrations can heal, I want to know what those vibrations are, and I want to get to the place where I'm experimenting and trying that out. But for this project, you're watching a film and you have to interpret the film, and I wanted to run away from just being melodic and singing and all of that. I wanted to, if there's paper crumpling, I want to be able to make the paper crumpling sound. I want to be able to push my voice to do something that I have never done, and that's what this experiment has offered me an opportunity to do, to place the voice in equal standing with other instruments, right? Place the voice as an instrument, as equal to viola, as equal to guitar, as equal to drums, as equal to synthesizer, as equal, and not as, oh, there's the singer and she's singing and she's the one singing in the song, or even. Oh, there is a singer somewhere, and all the other instruments are really overpowering, but we're all just in this together, and the voice is alive, and that's what this was for me. Yeah.
We're going to show you a bit of this in a moment, but I first want to introduce Billy. Billy, you're on the project as the orator. Talk to us a little bit about what that means for you, because you're also a vocal artist.
Yeah. So I guess the title was a strange one, on how you embody being an orator with a group of musicians and a film that is supposed to be silent. And that negotiation was a struggle, and I think we then began utilizing the struggle as a way into the picture, to get more information from the picture, what it suggests, and also what the company proposes. And another big thing was the idea of language, that my first thought is to respond in English. But my spirit knows Sesotho, Setswana, Sepedi. And speaking back to what Aragorn is talking about like really utilizing the energy as a response. Then I begin to tap into that intuitive knowing that begins to make me utter words. And also because being an orator, you always come from a point of knowing. In this, it's literally new. And the information is carried in the room. And I think that whole negotiation of using silence as well as a form of word to embody silence, to also hear other instruments and what they are proposing emotionally, and perhaps then try to reach to that emotional place in as far as word is concerned. And I think this relationship of the orator and the musician and the singer begins to happen there, that words then become song, become melody, become part of the scape. And it is freeing. I think also from a writing perspective that to some degree one begins to write before the page. And I think this is was a beautiful exercise as a writer, to write from a place of not knowing, and write from a place of performance, and then perhaps to the page. So the negotiation has been that where am I in the room? Where is the room going? How do I fit into that picture?
So I'd like us all to see a little bit about how this works. So this is the new ensemble of 3. We'll use a different excerpt of the same film by Penny Siopis a little bit later. And Billy, if you could start us off with a response, and then I'll bring Pertunia in, and then I'll bring Stompie in later on.
Sure.
Thank you, Barry.
Warumang. Wale. Warumang. ke motlhabile. Yeah, ke motlhabile ka thipa. And thipa ela na re loketse antirust. So
Pertunia, can you come in with your
the doctor di a mo checka. Ya ba mawaza asata immediately. So o thabile ka ntho well o ikutlwa bjang o llela eng. So o ka e boeletsa ntho e rileng. Yeah. Yeah.
Stompie in with your voice.
Well, o ka e boeletsa ntho yeah. Papa hao ke mang? Mama hao ke mang? O mo tlhobo mang? So umulaile. Well, yeah, ke mmolaile.
So, reflecting on where we began, the idea that film begins just as silent, and then you have an improvising musician play a soundtrack, and that's where you get your information around the emotions, the affect of the film. We wanted to go back to some of the principles of where that genre started, and there were a number of things that I asked the ensemble to think about. One was how to limit your palette. All of these musicians here come with multiple perspectives, multiple abilities, multi-personalities maybe even. and the idea was when approaching one film to try and find a way that you really synthesize your particular voice or your selection of palette in voice so that you are really making a precise contribution to what becomes an ensemble work. So precision, a choice of a very constricted palette, which then gives us all a bit more freedom, was one of the key things that I requested. The other was I asked people to think about not so much what you did last time to the film so that you could replicate it. These films were not necessarily seen by the performers here many, many times over. There was no opportunity for that. Again, very similar to how it would have begun in the film circuit 100 years ago. The musician was seeing the film maybe for the first time or maybe the second or the third time, and each time had to create a response spontaneously. The other request was that you took note of what you were creating, and in the second iteration, you try to give variation. So being aware of how many times you've repeated yourself becomes a very important key, and how then you vary and take that repetition elsewhere is a very important part of how the narrative arc starts to develop for each of the participants. The third principle was you are an individual, you've got an individual voice, but we are also an ensemble. What is the relationship between the individual contribution and the ensemble personality? These were some of the things that I requested. Are there any things that stood out for you that were particularly challenging or anxiety-inducing? Anybody? Yeah.
Hi everyone. For me, the challenge that I saw, because I'm not used to the filming, the challenge that I met is when they play the image it was very tricky for me because I'm used to the German groove. So the video that when they put the video, it was like, okay, that video, it took me down to collab that we are there, we are not there. So the frustration that I got is when they decided and say, Micca, can you lead? Everything changed, my body just switched because I've never lead before. When they say Micca lead, first time I didn't lead because I was scared. Then I just went home. When I went home, then I think about what I'm gonna do for leading the beautiful musician here. But the second time when I came, then I started to relieve myself and say, let me just calm down, because I know I'm not a person who knows the score. I don't understand the score. I don't understand the classic. For me, when I do my score is very tricky, because my score, if I'm gonna write the score, I just draw the instrument that I'm gonna use. Yeah. So that's my score. So I just draw the instrument that I'm gonna use. So it doesn't matter if it's 10, 20 pages or 100 pages, I would just draw each instrument that if there is something that I just draw this, and I draw this, then I know where to put those sound, because I believe that as people, we are not the same. There are people who are creative, who are talented, who can read, who can write. So some of us, it's a little bit tough, but when I started to lead, I just calm down and I feel enjoy, because when I was leader, it's nice, but it's tricky. It is nice. Yeah, but all I can say, I just want to say thanks to Neo, Athena, Dimakato, and the team for pushing me. Sometimes in life, what I've learned is that there are people who always believe in you, even though you don't believe in yourself, but there are things that you can do better to heal everyone. Right. Thank you.
That's great. So we've spent the past 3 days performing events in this series called Sounding Pictures. They've involved events playing in the atrium. Marily Stolp, a wonderful pianist, is playing out there. You'll see that later on tonight. We've had films in here, a series of which are on display from 7 o'clock. We've also had films in our Pepper's Ghost technology machine, which is in the second space. It's a wonderful, magical technology that comes from the 19th century, where a living performer can enter the dimension of a film, of an archive, and speak back across time. You can speak to the ancient spirits of 200 years ago. You can speak to progeny that is yet to come 1,000 years from now. So if you stay with us tonight, you'll be able to see some of that. We've practiced some of those things. Well, actually, you won't be able to see the Pepper's Ghost because we perform that on Wednesday and Thursday, on Thursday and Friday. So tonight, the program is really here. It's our top hits. our selection of Flourish. But I wanted to end our story here today by giving you a sense of some of what has been mentioned here today, the idea of improvisation, the idea of intuition, listening, call and response, the idea of choosing a defined palette, but also the idea of making space for one another. There's a place for cacophony, and then we must also make place for one another. Otherwise, if things start to sound the same, there's no movement, there's no development. So we'll do our last take where we involve the entire ensemble, and we'll use the same clip that we just saw of the last 2.5 minutes of Penny's film. Micca, I'm going to ask you to lead this one. and bring everybody in for a final flourish.
Someone had to do it. Yeah, no, someone had to do it. So, yeah, we the little man. Shaba Sassoon. Hey. One Mulaya. Yeah. Why? Someone had to do it. Why? Someone had to do it. Yeah, plus the one about us and the pizza have care. Maybe Mistress Bau Lamona. Hey, Bau Lamona. Agito, or get a douche. Yeah, he's or get a douche.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time left over. If anyone would like to ask a question at this point to any one of us, to any one of the ensemble, please show us your hand.
And please wait until a microphone gets to you so we can record, we can hear you, and so we have it in our report.
Yeah.
So I see a hand over
We
there.
have one there, yeah.
Could you please run that mic to the hands at the back? Thank you. It's not a question for any specific musician, but maybe everybody has thought about this. I'm wondering about hierarchy of response. If a bunch of musicians play together, your ear is what guides you. And if I hear the singer is singing in a certain pitch, I maybe on the piano go to the same pitch level, or I decide to resist it. But my response in terms of hierarchy is I hear and I use my ear. And now we have a film. So what are you more true to? Are you more true to what you hear? Are you more true to what you see? And can you decide that in the moment? Because different to a score with music, then the time goes on and there's no way to stop it. But time is much more free in a sense if you're improvising. But not if there's a film. If the film is there and the action in the film is continuing. So it's a very, very big abstract question. Enjoy.
Can I give it a whack? I would say that you definitely do both. You're true to, both of you, all of you are trying to do the same thing. You are watching the same thing and you are trying to do the same thing, and there's a point of meeting, and then you have to listen. Listening is a really big part of what we have to do here. Listening to yourself, what you are doing, how you are interpreting, and now I need to stop because the person who is telling the same story as me is telling it differently, and I want you to understand all the other things that are happening there as well, not just how I am interpreting it. I want you to hear how Daphne is interpreting it. I need you to hear that, and so I will pull back and I will listen, and I will allow my listening and what I find in my listening to help me come back and carry on the interpretation and change it, because okay, now Daph, we need to change together, and so Daph will change and stop and pull back. It's a lot of this. Yeah.
So for me, while watching the films, the music is suiting for the film, and it's like you are hearing what you're seeing, right? So my question is, was there ever a time or a point in the space where you see something, your body responds. Was there ever a time anyone went, I'm going against what I'm feeling, like opposing the film? And if there was a time, how did that feel? Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. We have a mic.
Definitely. We go for and against the feelings that are happening in here. I guess true to what the center stands for is to find the less good idea. So that first idea that you feel is wanting to respond sort of very literally to what you're seeing, but then giving way to a second and a third idea and being like, oh, okay, well, maybe I hadn't thought about it like that. So for me, I try not to interpret my instrument as a Western instrument by, giving Bach and everything else that I've done, but again, to like look at it in a way of how can I add texture? I'm not seeing it as a viola that needs to give a middle voice right now. I'm seeing it as, what if I can give a dreamy soundscape to what Billy is doing while he's orating? Or, how can I be a uhadi when Micca is, playing with the instrument? How can I play with people, and how can I sort of shape shift in a way that I see myself as the musician, but also my instrument as something that's constantly changing. So allowing also contradiction. I think that's also a really important and a very fun place to be in, that allows us to keep the images fresh, but also the way that we engage with one another as an ensemble. I think it's this constant dance, this constant conversation that we're having. Sometimes we bicker, sometimes we're laughing, sometimes it's like, okay, you want a solo moment? Fine, I'll give it to you. But then knowing what your position is and allowing that position to stay and develop, but then also completely losing your position and finding something else that speaks to what is happening in the now.
Is there one final burning question? Perhaps two final burning questions we'll take.
Hi, so my question is, there's a lot of mention of different emotions, different interpretations of what the ask is. And I suppose the beauty of music is in the coming together of the difference, right? So the differences and the variations. It's a story that is highly emotive, with or without the sound, a topic that is highly emotive, whether then or now. My question is, what was the meeting ground or the meeting place for the emotion, the interpretation, and the sound? Yeah.
Are you speaking about a specific film or generally for each, for the films? Okay.
Anybody who
Okay.
worked on this project, what was the meeting ground? Regardless of who you were working with, regardless of which film you were working on, how did it all come together?
Yeah. Anyone to take that?
I think another big thing was the idea of storytelling, because the goal is to tell the same story, and because we are collaborating in creating the story, you're constantly having to listen deeply, but also to bravely offer the direction in which the story could possibly go. And I think that bravery and this elasticity was the game. That you go in, you come out. You come in, you let go. So and story then becomes the thing that we're all trying to find. At the end of try, then we have a little chat back on what did that feel like, what does that look like, how do you think, where else can it go? And I think that quest of story then becomes the thing that glues us. Yeah.
Well said, orator.
And a final question up there?
I wanted to just say, from sitting outside, the way that you've all described this is so apt as an individual who gets the chance to watch it. And just to notice how extraordinary our brains are in terms of how much they can process in one moment. And, seeing the films in different iterations with different scores, a film literally slows down or speeds up. Your eye is interpreting a different shade or noticing the background versus the foreground. What we see is a complete illusion then in the real world. And so in this instance, I'm just sitting here marveling at the complexity of what the eye and the ear are telling the brain to construct, and then to understand the complexity of you as individuals being in this deep listening, which we don't do enough of. That it's just a kind of a unbelievable example of what, as individuals moving out of the space and without an instrument in the hand, but onto the street, in terms of a witnessing of each other, and that allowance to have the conflict, to push and pull back and forward, to give each other the solo, to highlight somebody's story. It's just extremely moving. Thank you.
So I'm going to wrap it up there by saying an enormous thank you to each of you for doing something that is very difficult, because we normally process a process or make sense of it a long time after. And we've asked you to, in the middle of this process, to really understand the complexities of what you're doing. So thank you for doing that. Thank you because, firstly, it helps this audience who's about to go into the 7 o'clock program come into it with a deep appreciation for the magic they're about to experience. And I don't use that word lightly. You're in for magic. The last 2 nights, there has been magic at the center, created by these magicians. So thank you for allowing us greater, deeper insight and appreciation for what you do and all of these complexities that we're witnessing. And then also to voice these strategies and these processes, and for us to document them in a way that helps us document these alternative ways of making, that is not about scoring in sort of the global north or the western canon of annotation. So many of you have spoken about working from the body, working from listening to each other, from this push and pull, from this give and take. And so you've started to articulate and define a compositional process that is really about humanity as composition and our ability to relate to each other as humans as compositional strategy. So thank you that we could capture that. That is something that the center celebrates, that the academy celebrates. And yeah, thank you, Neo, for bringing us this extraordinary project, and thank you all for coming to it so generously. Thank you all for joining us for the How. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. We'll see you later.